You are listening to Veggie Doctor Radio, and this is episode number 103. Hey, I'm your host, Dr. I'm a board-certified pediatrician, certified health and wellness coach, author, and I'm also a passionate promoter of the power of diet and lifestyle in preventing and reversing chronic disease and bringing joy and longevity into our lives. This podcast is focused on plant-based nutrition, habit formation, motivation, and mindset so that you can have the tools to live the best life possible. Are you ready to get started? Let's do this.
People always choose love, compassion, respect. They almost always choose those same core things. Then they might choose a little outlier, fitness, something like that. Great. But those core ones are there. And then, it's like, are you living in alignment with those values?
Welcome, veggie lovers. Happy Sunday. I hope that you are having a very plantastic day. I have such a beautiful episode for you today. I hope that it will touch your heart and make you feel good, and that after this episode, the call to action will resonate with you. Today, I'm talking to Jonina and Sarah from Lancaster Farm Sanctuary. But before I talk about them and what they do, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to my podcast so that you know when all of the episodes are released. We are doing bonus episodes every single week, lots of goodies for you. And also, if you have time, rate and review. I would appreciate it so much. It means a lot to me. Also, don't forget about my newsletter. You can sign up in two ways. You can text the word fiber, F-I-B-E-R, to 66866, or you can go to dryami.com/sign up. Thank you for all of you that have read my book, A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating, How to Raise Kids Who Love to Eat Healthy. And another thanks to those that have left a review on Amazon. I appreciate it, and it helps other people find the book. And I want to read this 5-star review from Amazon by Yasmin Moore. She titles it Insightful. Very well written with lots of well thought out information, helped me understand more about what kids should be eating, why they should be eating it, and how to trust and be aware of their natural ability to understand their own hunger. The bonus is that it also helped me to look at my own eating habits differently and address some issues I have had. Wow, Yasmin, thank you so much. And I am so glad that it has helped you and your kids and how you feed your family and how you feed yourself and how you feel about yourself. That is huge. And I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk about the Lancaster Farm Sanctuary. So this is a farm sanctuary that is run by Jonina Turzi and Sarah Saluzzo in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So Jonina was born and raised in Lancaster County and feels grateful for the connections about spirituality, wellness, yoga, and farm animals she learned about there. She is a co-founder of Lancaster Farm Sanctuary, a volunteer district leader for HSUS, and a doctor of physical therapy and yoga educator. She owns a private physical therapy practice in Lancaster City where she provides functional manual therapy and a variety of postural and osteopathic interventions for chronic and complex pain, including visceral and craniosacral therapies. She also owns West End Yoga, a yoga studio, and Yoga Sanctuary School, a yoga teacher training and continuing education business for wellness practitioners and serious yoga students. Sounds so fun. All right, Sarah Saluzzo is also from Lancaster County. She has a master's in media studies from the New School University and an MSW from Millersville University. She is a lifelong devoted friend to all animals. She is co-founder of Lancaster Farm Sanctuary, a volunteer district leader for Humane Society of the United States, and recently retired from her position as an inpatient rehabilitation drug and alcohol therapist. Sarah is a yoga practitioner with a long history of social activism. Sarah and Jonina are a couple and founded the sanctuary in an effort to better the lives of both humans and farmed animals in their community. And to find out more about Lancaster Farm Sanctuary, please visit lancasterfarmsanctuary.org, or you can find them on Instagram at Lancaster Farm Sanctuary. So I started following Lancaster Farm Sanctuary on Instagram a while back. It's probably been at least a year, and I just fell in love, and I just really felt called to have these ladies on the podcast so that you can hear about the work of farm sanctuaries, what the reality is like, what their needs are, and if you feel called to it, to donate. But I think even if you can't financially contribute right now, listening to this podcast episode will teach you a lot, will bring out some of that compassion and empathy, and at least get some good positive energy flowing for ourselves, each other, and for these special beings that we have a privilege of sharing the earth with. So I really hope that it resonates with you, that this brings you some good positive feelings today, and that you feel called to action by the end of this episode. Now let's hear from Jonina and Sarah. Jonina and Sarah, I am so excited to have you both on Veggie Doctor Radio today.
Hey, we're so excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, I've been following your Instagram feed, and I don't even know how I found it. Probably because my last name is Lancaster, and I kind of gravitated towards that. But I just have to say, I have absolutely fallen in love with your sanctuary and all of your beautiful residents. And I knew I had to make sure I got lots of sleep last night because I cry so much when I read the stories of hope and salvation and just the beautiful lives that you provide for the animals at your sanctuary. So before we even begin with the questions, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do.
Thank you. So yeah, that's very kind. Thank you for saying that. We're so excited to be here and to talk with you and to share about our work. So thank you for having us.
Awesome. Well, let's tell the listeners about your sanctuary. How did Lancaster Farm Sanctuary come about?
We, a few years ago, Sarah and I saw a need in our community. We had been doing some work with the Humane Society, HSUS. We had worked on some important pieces of legislation for our state and helping to protect animals here more. And we noticed that farm animals were literally excluded from these protections. So all the work we had been doing, it literally stated, well, except for animals farmed for food or birds or chickens. And we just thought, how can we help serve animals? How can we do more work advocating for animals farmed for food? And we thought that sanctuary magic and medicine was real. And we really saw that need in our community.
Yeah, and we had been to other sanctuaries and thought it was actually just this glaring omission that in Lancaster, which is one of the most, and this is a quote, right, one of the most agriculturally productive counties in the entire United States, that there was no representation of another way to interact with these beings, right? So you drive around here and it's like farm after farm after farm. And we're both from here, so now it's factory farm after factory farm after factory farm, and people people aren't thinking about it, right? It's what everybody was raised with, and this is what you do, and we just wanted to be an example of another way of relating, to these beings. So
Yeah. And how
yeah.
long ago was that you guys decided to start it?
Only like 3 years ago. So we moved in here right at this time of year 3 years ago, and then we took our first rescues in October. It will be 3 years. So
Wow.
and I feel like we've really only gotten like really moving in the past year or so. I would say we were very deliberate to be slow at the beginning, so we didn't overwhelm ourselves
Mhm.
and make terrible mistakes, right? So we
Yeah.
wanted to learn and just take our time and do it right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I definitely want to get into that, because whenever you have a sanctuary, I can imagine that it could get overwhelming very quickly. But did you both ever have an inkling that you would work with animals this way, like whenever you were younger? Or was this just something that came out of the blue and you're like, all right, we're going to do this?
It's funny because I had no interest in farming. Again, where I went to high school, kids would sometimes ride their tractors to school. As Sarah mentioned, we're surrounded by farms. And I have to say, it never occurred to me that I had an interest in farming. I always say I have an interest in farm sanctuarying. And that was news to me. It wasn't until I even knew they existed or that they were possible. I was standing on one when I realized it was even possible. And then, of course, yes, it felt like all these pieces of my life came together that I had not been able to make sense of until then.
Yeah. And I was one of those kids that was always like, I want to be a veterinarian, I want to be a marine biologist. So, you don't know any other options, but I knew I loved animals as a kid. So, and then, I worked with horses for a long time. And again, though, it was like, oh, like this is another possibility, right? We could do work like this. When we actually visited Farm Sanctuary in Catskill, that we felt inspired, so it did feel, I think for both of us, it felt like this really makes sense, but you don't know to like dream of something that you don't even know is possible, at the beginning. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You had to be creative. You had to think of something new that wasn't already there.
Yeah.
It can be
Yeah.
exciting, but it can also be very challenging, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Sure.
So both of you guys have other professions and other careers, and you were trained in other things. So how did you learn what was necessary to do this whole new, area of study? Like you have to know things. How did you prepare yourself for starting this farm sanctuary?
Yeah. So one thing, well, there were a bunch of things I think that we did. A lot of reading, honestly, just kind of studying, reading, watching YouTube videos, oddly enough. And then we did go to a few trainings at other sanctuaries, and learned, a lot about kind of there's the animal care piece of things, but then there's also marketing and fundraising, and we do everything. So there was a lot to learn. So those trainings were helpful in kind of getting an overview of the different facets of sanctuary work. And then we have also been fortunate to have some volunteers and board members that can fill in the gaps for the areas that we're not super savvy about, like technology, for example, and things like that. So we have people that were like, can you send out this MailChimp blast? Because I don't know how to do it, right? So that's been really important, is to know when you need to ask for help.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But Sarah had been involved with horses. So
Yeah.
she had some large farm animal care background. That animal care piece was huge for us.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so she had that piece. And then, as Sarah mentioned, we went to multiple day trainings at large sanctuaries and kind of learned best practices, because it is new science. I really like that phrase. It's new veterinary science, relatively, to look at the animal's health from a sanctuary perspective. It had never been done before a few decades ago. And so to even have best practices for when you actually want an animal to live as long as possible and enjoy life as much as possible, we went and took good notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. All right. So I mean, it's super romantic, right? I mean, especially for people that love animals and longtime vegans, and you think about, wow, it's so beautiful, and you help these animals, you give them a good life. But I want to start with the parts that are the hard parts, the parts that are maybe not so pretty. So, what do you each think is the hardest part of this kind of work?
You want to start?
Sure. Yeah.
With a big sigh.
Yeah, we wrote that down and I'm looking at it and then, I love talking to you, Dr. Yami. I'm just going from the top of my head and heart here. For me, actually, it is having to say no so often and facing the vastness of the horrific and dire circumstance that farmed animals are in. So just every day here on our sanctuary, multiple trucks pass by our driveway per day of birds. We see slaughter trucks passing constantly with cows and pigs, and to have met these animals as individuals, sometimes we're in the pasture, hanging out with one of our residents, and then you see a truck of their kind drive by, and it's just this disconnect, and you feel like, well, am I doing enough? Is this, so it's facing the looming vastness of what we're up against that's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the hardest thing. So there's, the obvious, which is that it's tiring and, you don't really get free time anymore. But definitely the biggest weight, I think, is just the psychological, reality of like what, we're like this little, especially here, we're like this little tiny drop in this ocean of exploitation that is surrounding us in every direction that you look. I mean, from our sanctuary, we hear continually the sounds, because there's dairies all around us of, mother cows like bellowing in grief, for their babies being taken away. You can hear that from our farm all day long, and it's just it sucks, so
Yeah.
that's hard.
That's
Yeah.
really heavy because it's almost like you constantly feel like you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And that's hard
Yeah.
to keep your heart in the game and stay joyful whenever you just constantly feel like it's not enough.
Yeah. We're working on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
spiritual practice right there.
Yeah.
No, I think that's important because obviously we're talking about creatures and beings and what some people would call other people. They're just non-human people. But this feeling can apply to so many different parts of our lives. And
Sure.
I think it leads to the same thing. Whenever we feel like we're not enough, we're not doing enough, we're not contributing enough, it kind of sucks the life out of what we're already doing.
Yeah.
So I want to validate that, but I also want to tell you that from my perspective, because I don't have a sanctuary at all, I think you're doing so much. So from what the rest of us see, because we're not in your shoes, it's important for you guys to realize that. But I want to go back to what Sarah was saying about the work and how tiring it is. Tell me about what a day looks like at the farm, the chores. I want to know about, like, do you ever get to take a day off? Do you get to go on vacation? What is life like for you now?
Yeah. It's so funny. I was talking to my friend the other day and I said, how did this happen? Like, I'm someone who likes to travel and I want to just like read a book and drink a cappuccino at a cafe, and it's like, now this is my life and it's crazy. And, it's nonstop. We wake up at 5 a.m. and we get started and we, go to bed, we come in at 7 p.m. and it's all day long, every day. And that's just what it is. And it's not so much of it is so fun and wonderful. I mean, right now we're waking up at 5 a.m. because we have a little lamb, Orville, that we rescued recently, and that's when he starts to cry and he wants his bottle in the morning, right? So it's not like, oh God, I have to get up. It's like, oh my gosh, Orville's crying. I like run down, excited to see him and make his bottle, So I don't want to sound like it's just like a drag, but it is definitely tiring. And we are working on finding balance. We're really blessed that we have a lot of great volunteers, so that this it makes it possible for us to do this at all. So we, occasionally pre-quarantine, we would get to a movie or dinner or something, but before before starting this, we were like, let's go to Costa Rica, let's go to Cuba, let's go do this, like that's how we lived, and now we're like, oh well, that's over. Right? So, and that's all right, this is what we're up to now, so it's just a different way. And I think in a few years, hopefully once we get a little more well established and maybe we're able to hire a couple of people, then we can go back to at least maybe once a week, once a year, going on a vacation, doing something like that. So, yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Jonina?
Yeah, I mean, and we kind of go with the sun, which is cool. So when the sun rises, things are starting, and when the sun goes down, so even those times can change. Like winter, we noticed, oh, we're actually in by 6 p.m. Ooh. So it's neat to have those rhythms of like kind of a day really being the animal's schedule. But yeah, that's very different from your modern, what you thought of as modern culture, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, super interesting. So what other kind of chores do you have to do? So I hear about Orville and eating his plow. sounds like having a baby in the house, you got to feed the baby.
Yeah.
What other things do you have to do around the farm?
Yeah, so we kind of a regular day for us is to wake up and we feed everyone breakfast, and then we clean a lot of the enclosures, and we also try to spend some time with them, like, just talk to them, check on them, see how they're doing that day. That's so important to, just kind of, like I said, check on them. It's like sometimes somebody that seemed okay yesterday might appear a little lethargic that day. Like, you have to be really on top of those types of things. If there's an injury or an illness, you need to be able to get them care right away. So we definitely do that every morning. And then we have a sheep, Zach, who has a chronic neurological disorder. So he needs help to walk. And we actually hold him and take him out for a walk every morning. So he loves that. And we just kind of, hold his like rear and help him balance, and he does the rest, but so he doesn't fall over. And that's, a 30-minute thing that we do a couple times a day. And just cleaning and socializing. I mean, everybody jokes. It's like one of the volunteers last night was like, it's so funny when you guys like come out and it's mealtime, everybody's like, mom, because she has a few kids. And she said, they just all start yelling for you guys, like, come over, pay attention to me, and it's just like, so you have to make sure everybody gets, time and attention. Yeah. It's really cute. Yeah.
And that's just animal care. So then again, right. By then it's like midday, then usually volunteers would come now that we're having help again. So then there's some larger cleaning projects that they help with. We did like the small enclosure, but then there's a larger project pretty much each day. And then maybe some computer time for fundraising. Like right now we're, writing letters because we're moving to a bigger farm. We could talk about that. But, so there's a lot of that fundraising piece and the administrative tasks that make it go. And by the time you're even halfway done with those, it's time for evening chores. And then we start all over with a new meal and another walk and physical therapy for little Orville massaging his leg. Let's just talk about Orville the whole time. So it's therapeutic care as in addition to just the basic, essential, and critical tasks of food, health checks, and cleaning.
Yeah.
Wow, there's so much that go into it. How many residents do you guys have right now? And tell us what types of animals you have at the sanctuary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a little over 60 animals here now. We have cows. I always say sheeps. We've got sheep, goats, We've got pigs. We've got two types of pigs: the big pink, like the industry type pigs, and then some pot-bellied piggy brothers. We've got turkeys, ducks, and two types of chickens. Very different types of birds. So the type that are bred for their eggs and the type that are bred for their flesh.
Wow. That's so interesting. And I love how you post about your new residents and give us their story, and then you're able to show their progress. And
Yeah.
it really just highlights how important you are to helping them feel better and live a joyful life. So 60 animals. I didn't know you had that many. That's a lot.
Yeah. And then when we move, it's going to be even more. So
Oh, gosh.
yeah, it's like, I mean, well, again, we'll be careful that we don't, overwhelm ourselves. But yeah, we're excited about that.
To be able to
Well,
rescue more.
speaking of overwhelm, this isn't free. It costs money to take
Yeah.
care of animals. Like you said, they have to eat, you have to groom them. And then sometimes they get sick, or when they come in, sometimes they're very sick.
Yeah.
So tell me about the kinds of expenses you have and how do you pay for that stuff?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's animal care expenses that are fixed, like food and bedding, variable types like vet care. Some animals require much more regular. We have a veterinarian or two that comes to the farm. And then there's just area maintenance, fencing and housing and repairs. Then there's the expense of, we just now have recently switched to having an employee. We have Sarah as the as the executive director, and so we have our first time ever having a payroll individual, a salaried employee, very meager salary, but that was critical for us. It was in October of 2019. We switched from both of us having very full-time jobs additionally to this, to Sarah being
It was too much.
full-time at the helm. Yeah, it just absolutely had to happen. And then once it happened, we're like, how did we even for one day function without someone here doing this full-time? So those expenses, the money, it comes from donations and from community support. We've tried to have, in the past, we had physical events and fundraiser dinners, and we did sanctuary yoga, cooking classes and lectures, and tried to have different interfaces where we were not only serving our mission and having humans engage with animals here, but also in ways that would make money and help us cover the expenses of animal care and the function.
Yep.
Yeah. And obviously, with the coronavirus, that's put a damper on some of those fundraising activities. So hopefully, you'll be back on track soon, especially with the move. So, one of the things I have been curious about is, I've heard about, just like you were talking before, that running a farm sanctuary, like I said, sounds romantic, sounds really fun, and a lot of people just have the heart for it. But sometimes people go into it and they go too far, and then it actually can be harmful to animals. So, how can donors that want to support sanctuaries that are doing it right find out about the quality of a farm sanctuaries and which ones to support financially or through their volunteer hours? How can they find out about that?
Yeah. So there's no really good answer to that question. I think in our experience, if you pay attention to social media, and I think just think critically about what you're seeing, that's the best way. There's so many people, like you said, that have the heart for it and definitely are well intended, but are not really doing right by the animals. And then there are, of rescues. I mean, there are a couple around here where it's like they're not even vegan, and that makes absolutely no sense. Like they're having literally like hot dog and hamburger, like cook cookouts to like raise money to save other animals. I mean, that's
Horses,
just
yeah.
right. So that's something surely you want to look at and pay attention to, like what are you supporting in that way. I think you know it's maybe, like you said, volunteering and just getting to know the sanctuary and seeing firsthand, how they handle things, how they care for the animals, is another way to know. In our experience with many of the sanctuaries we've been to, a lot of the larger sanctuaries have some decent funding already, which is great. But I mean, those larger sanctuaries are a lot of them that we've seen. I don't want to make blanket statements, but they're doing tremendous work, and so I think that's really awesome. But yeah, you just gotta think, right, and look beyond a cute little animal video that you might be seeing to patterns in behaviors, and what are their messages, and what resonates with you. So different messages are going to resonate with different people. We're really interested in the way different forms of oppression are interrelated, and that's something that's important to us too in messaging, and that's something we love to see other sanctuaries talk about. So maybe that's important to someone, and then that's the kind of sanctuary they want to support. So yeah.
Absolutely. Everything Sarah said. And a lot of times if you look, you can sometimes catch, if you read in the language, perhaps in social media or on their website, whether it's really animal-centered design, if the structures and behaviors are based on the animal's best interests, or if it's still kind of that savior complex thing that you hear about a lot, where is this really about the human being the savior? Is that what's mostly happening or driving things here? Or is the driving practice empathy with the animal and trying to make decisions based on their best lives?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's pretty deep.
Yeah.
Information. So
Yeah.
So a lot of people have been hit financially during the pandemic, and so they may not be able to make financial donations right now. So how else can people support farm sanctuaries besides monetary?
Yeah. Volunteering, definitely. But again, during this time, like, we're not taking new volunteers. I'm sure most sanctuaries probably are not. So another thing that is, might seem small, but is actually really helpful, is just like following on social media and maybe sharing content, sharing posts, making comments, reaching out. But that's been really helpful to us. We are relatively new, and so that's how we've built this community, is so much just through this kind of grassroots, like friends telling friends and sharing about things. And then we've built this really wonderful community here, and that's how it happens. So, and that's nothing, that barely takes any time or energy, and certainly doesn't take any money, but it makes a big difference. So
Yep.
Yeah, social media, just because I know how important it is to what I do as well.
sure.
It's really important for other people finding you. I mean, I found you, I'm in Washington State. So
Yeah.
if I wouldn't have found you if you weren't on social media. So even though it is another task to add to your very long task of things to do, and hopefully you can also have volunteers that help you with that, but it is very important. So all the listeners out there, you don't have the funds right now, if you can't actually go to Pennsylvania and help their sanctuary, you can at least follow and share, comment, so that you can help spread the word to other people.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we talked about the hard stuff, the reality of running a sanctuary. I want to know from both of you, what's the best part about running a farm sanctuary?
It's the animals. It's spending time with the gang. There is just nothing. I mean, so as we all know here, probably your listeners are listening for a reason. To see not just the ones that are already doing well, but to meet someone who's been through a really tough time, and the transformation. To have an animal come from a case where humans equaled pain or humans were abusive, and to watch them open up and trust and it's just a miracle. Like there is like that transformation, that settling in, that belonging. And then of course, like you can't help but feel good because you're a part of it. And it makes your heart feel so big, and it's the best.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much joy in seeing them be happy, and like I imagine we don't have human children, but I wonder, that's got to be kind of what it's like, oh look, like so and so's making friends, with so and so, and they're hanging out together, and they seem to really like each other. It's like, it's so funny.
Yeah, look,
we joke.
Charlotte the pig went out for the school play. That's so exciting.
It's funny, but we joke like it is funny because they're so complex, and people don't. That's one of the biggest things that surprises people. I think we've actually been giving a lot of virtual tours to corporations and other people privately during this whole quarantine thing, and people are always like so surprised to see the complexity. You go into the goat barn and you see it's always like the families are in little clusters, like this mom's laying with her daughters and this mom's laying with her daughter, and here's Abby the sheep with her son and her daughter. Like they love to spend time together and just, they sleep on a pile together and things like that. And it's also just cool to share, like there's joy in sharing their joy with other humans and watching the light bulb kind of come on with people too. So that's another part of it, but yeah, it's so fun. And we always joke about the chickens, like they're on like a soap opera, like there's so much drama all the time, like who's fighting with who and like what's happening this day.
Oh yeah.
And it's fun. Like we joke about it all the time, and so that's nice for us too. It lightens things up. And
yeah, and it's that word you use, Dr. Yami, there's joy, and it's contagious. Like, so maybe at first it's looking at a tough situation and dealing with some wounds and some trauma, but joy happens. Like, you just make space, and then it's this contagious miracle. I said that word already, but it's really, it's life, and it can be joyful when sanctuary work can be so liberating for joy.
Yeah. And you don't always know what's going to happen, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling the story of Luna, because Luna is just one of my favorites. I don't know, she just captured my heart. And talk about what happened to her, why she first came in, and how she's progressed during her journey.
Yeah, so Luna is a sheep, and in mid-February, so just 3 months ago, one of our board members and some friends of hers were at New Holland auction, which everybody here knows what that is, but for your listeners, so very close to where we are is the largest quote unquote livestock auction on the East Coast. So it is this massive, horror show of a place, and they were there. And they were just kind of looking through at the animals, and you're not allowed to, really take photos or document anything. So it's all, you get it. And they saw this sheep in a pen and kind of took notice of her and made a lap and came back and noticed she was just in the same spot that she had been. And in the pen with her were 2 dead babies. So she had birthed these babies, and our vet, from looking at the photo, was under the impression that one had been stillborn and one was probably alive at birth and then died shortly thereafter. And Luna was unable to move. I mean, she couldn't stand up, but she couldn't even lift her head up, by when she got to us. So anyway, they saw her in there, and they asked one of the workers, could we please take this sheep? And he, for whatever reason, and oddly, said yes. And so they ran and got a tarp and got her out of there. And our board member friend made a comment that he had said, you probably won't see me here next time you're here. meaning he was afraid that he was going to get in trouble for letting them take Luna out of there. So anyway, they got her out, called me and said, we're bringing this sheep over. She's in a terrible state. And so I got off the phone, called the vet. I said, can you please come right away? We have an emergency. She came over. Luna got here. When they opened the car door, I thought, she's not going to make it another hour. She actually just looked dead already in the back of the car. So we got her out. The vet arrived right then. A lot of, emergency care. And she was, well, you saw the photos, but I mean, she was filthy. She smelled so terrible. You could smell infection on her, and then you could just smell feces and urine. She had just blood and infection coming out of her body from the births, and she couldn't move at all. And it was just so, so sad. It was just the saddest thing.
And you texted me, I was finishing up my therapy clients, and you texted me about her, that she was coming, and then you sent a follow-up text and said she might not make it, but we're just going to surround her with love, and this might, this is just what we could do for her, was put her in the sunshine and be around her while she passes.
Yeah. But to make a long story short, 3 months later, she's like now in charge of the barn.
Yelling at people outside.
Probably right now. So a lot of veterinary care for her. The vet was here almost every day that first week, and still making follow-ups. But we managed with kind of devising this sling that we suspended from the barn rafters to her on her feet. It was a lot of work, like different steps in between. But, we got her standing, we got her eating and drinking. Eventually we got her walking, and it is just so crazy. I mean, she is so strong, and she has this like vivacious kind of spirit. Like it's really wild to remember what she had been like. And to know that was all in there, and she just needed some love and some care. And, they were going to shoot her. He told them that the plan for her was just to shoot her that night and be rid of her. And so, she has many years of life left in her. She does have a form of pneumonia, which you can see when she gets stressed. She does her breathing gets a little labored. And she is definitely still traumatized. She is very fond of me. She is. And so she'll cry, for me, and I'll just go and hold her and put my head to her head, and she quiets down, and she just wants me to touch her face and tell her it's going to be okay. But it's interesting because now she's letting other volunteers do that too. And that's a change. And I think we'll just continue to see these changes with her, that she becomes a little more open and trusting, and hopefully, more relaxed. And so, but she's doing really great. And we can't wait to see at the new farm, just see her in a big field. And hopefully the hope is to adopt some other sheep, maybe even from a bigger sanctuary that adopts out, that have the same condition, which is contagious, so that they can just have their own herd and all have their little pneumonia thing together. It's, no problem.
It goes into remission. Like, she hasn't had respiratory symptoms per se. When she's stressed, her breathing does look labored, but she used to cough a lot. She used to have a productive respiratory symptom that's been gone for months.
Yeah.
So we're cautious, because the last thing we want to do is put her, spittle around others. But it's great. She's literally running now and bouncing around, and she is so strong. We were doing a hoof trimming or something, and she knocked both of us over. Like, this girl is like,
she's strong. Yeah, she's really great.
Yeah. Well, it's just been so inspiring to see her story from the beginning, because I had already been following you when her story started at the sanctuary, and to see the true emotion that animals experience, because you could tell at the beginning, not only was she hurting physically, but she was hurting emotionally, and she lost her babies, and she was depressed. You know,
very much so.
sad, you know. But you believed in her and you supported her through her healing. And, you know, it's only been a few months, so I can't even imagine what it might be like next year. You know, we've had even more time to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Can't wait to see. Yeah.
Just to give an idea, because it sounds like she needed pretty intensive vet care. Like, how much does that cost?
It's a few $1,000s.
Yeah, a couple $1,000s, I would say. Yeah, I mean, it was frequent. So you're talking a couple $100 a pop, you know, and the vet was here a lot. And then, you know, just the sling and some special things that she required additionally. So, and she did get a lot of medications and, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
And it would be hard to quantify hours too. So it's special care and to keep her boundary from others. You know, we're constantly having to monitor her location relative to others for their safety and for theirs. But so it's like it's staff and it's shelter and those are hours that add up too.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest myth about running a farm sanctuary?
I think, which we touched on earlier when we were laughing, you know, but it is, everybody says to us, you're living my dream, you know? And it's funny. And of course it looks like that when you watch a video, you know, but it's like, it's exhausting and you are in it. You're in it. There's no going back, you know, and so you have to realize that most likely, you know, every single day of the year, you're waking up and you're pretty much doing the same thing over and over. We don't ever sleep in. You never get a sick day unless you're like really, really, you know, down and out, which has happened, I think, one time. I mean, you just push through and you just do what you have to do. So you miss out on like a lot of social events and other things going on. So, I mean, this is your life. Like, this is what you're up to. And so it seems very romantic and sweet and fun. And then, you know, it's kind of like somebody told a friend of ours that if you want to start a farm sanctuary, volunteer at another sanctuary every day for a year. And once you've done that, volunteer every day for another year. And then decide if you want to start a farm sanctuary, because that's the reality of it. So
yeah, we didn't do that, but we were dedicated to the cause so much. Just exactly that it is romantic, and we focus on the positives because that's where we think we're having the great impact from it, and because it's what keeps us going. And then so we find ourselves talking about those things and reinforcing this. It is a beautiful hour or 3 a day that aren't that stressful. If we're lucky, we get time to just be with them. And then the rest of it is so hard that not many people would think of that as their dream.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you answered that. So speaking of the fun parts, which animals have impacted each of you emotionally the most?
Oh,
it's so hard to say, but honestly, just like when we were talking about Luna earlier, I felt like, you know, I could cry just like sharing about her story. And also, yeah, you can talk about Stanley.
Yeah. We thought Luna and Stanley, we wrote those answers down to talk to Dr. Yami. So Stanley was a goat who was one of our first rescues, and he had a neurologic condition, and we bottle fed him, and he had, there's so many layers to having loved him, known him, supported him, and then lost him. We supported the end of his life on January 6th was his last day here. So Stanley was good. So good. So there's layers to it, because it's not just having loved him and lost him, but that he was so good. Like you could not meet him and not notice what a funny, quirky, cool guy he was. He was just objectively like all the best things you could be. And that he would, there's layers to it. There was the fact that he would have been killed for meat if he had been healthy. He would have been dead, before he died. And then there was this neurologic problem. So there's like this layer of weird ableism in our culture, because just because he was a little weaker, his legs worked, they just didn't work as well. And because of that, he was going to be left in a field to die. And luckily someone intervened and got him here. So there's all these layers of injustice, and just it's messed up, the system he was born into and the body that made him less than. And I'm sorry, having met him, I've met lots of people, he was just as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So just to be grateful that we knew him.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. It sounds like he touched you so deeply.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Well, which resident is a fan favorite? Who gets the most likes?
I will say
Who would we say?
I honestly think, and it has been interesting for me to see that it is Luna. I would say, like, Luna captured so many people. And I think that's actually like something that kind of lifts my spirit a little bit, because it wasn't a cute little baby. Like, everybody loves Orville, of course, and he's so adorable, and we love him so much. And he does get, he gets a lot of attention, but it wasn't that. Like, it was this old sheep, that was treated like garbage by humans. And I think because people too, that photo of her in the pen with her dead babies, that I think was so eye-opening and so poignant and powerful. And people saw that, and they, really, really connected to her suffering. And for whatever reason, so many people hold so much pain, but many people messaged us and said, like, I really feel connected to her. I saw that photo and that really resonates with me. So who knows what their stories are, but that, people connected to that. And I think people felt like there's so much shit in this world, and it's like, but she is making it. And so that gives people hope, I think that gives people hope. And so that, I really love that, because it isn't just like the cute little baby goat or whatever, that people connected to. They connected to this old, cast off, filthy, lice-ridden sheep, and like, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So
and to have had a mothering, a type of abuse that's specific to mothering too, that feels really powering. I would have said too, you said it wasn't the babies, but baby piglet Shelby.
Oh yeah.
Blasted into our lives last year. We all had the privilege of getting to care for a little baby piglet who came out of nowhere. She was all by herself walking down the middle of the road. She was a little scratched and bruised, but here's this like 15 pounds of bright pink sass. Some good Samaritans scooped her up and got her here that same day. And so our followers have gotten to, watch her grow. And Shelby the piglet, now Shelby the 250 pound. She likes to jump on your back when you're sitting on the ground. Look out, Shelby will also steal your heart. She's a favorite as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, she was a fighter and a survivor, huh? She was like,
heck yeah.
Through. Well, what do you wish more people knew?
You want to? You want to answer?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I really love your questions. So if you don't mind, I'll just get a little deep here. This is what I wish people knew. I wish people could see the link in humanity's deep history, going way back to when we switched from foraging, some hunting, that deep history for humanity had a major fork in the road. And when we switched to owning other animals, confining their movements, building fences around them, appropriating mothers and family bonds, selling them, selling individuals, and putting a price on their head. I think that deep history where humanity switched to supremacy and superiority outside of just hunting, outside of ecology, we're talking about dominion instead of care and stewardship. And I know that gets real deep and spiritual, but I think that was such a violent and dangerous and psychologically unstable step that we all took. It's no one's fault. It's not one group of people's fault. Let's not point fingers at the animal farmers. They're doing what their parents did and their grandparents did. And that we together collectively as a species could heal so profoundly by owning this collectively, what we call speciesism and this superiority myth, that the myth that we're cruel. Well, where does that come from? Are we cruel, or have we been handed these set of practices that we don't question? And it confuses us about who we are with respect to nature.
Yeah, totally. And it's related to all other forms of violence and supremacy, right? So it's like the birthplace of that, right? Competition rather than, cooperation. And it's powerful. So
and I love what you said, Jonina, about how it's not really anybody's fault, because I come from a family of farmers. So you probably don't know, but my family in Panama, they're dairy farmers, and pretty significantly so. And my uncle is very deeply involved with helping other farmers be successful. So it's a big impact there. But like you said, we learn what's passed down to us. That's how we become socialized. That's how we know what to wear and how to act and how to talk. It's all passed down to us. But what I want to ask of you, listener, is to really get into your heart and just really listen. And I want to give you permission that it's okay to deviate, to follow what you feel is true to your heart. Because I think that's the hard part, right? So whenever I first became vegan, it's uncomfortable. You have this cognitive dissonance that's like, everybody says you need to eat meat, you should eat meat, that's what everybody else does. Not just for the health reasons, because I'm a physician, so that was hard too, but also because that's just what we do. I mean, as humans, we kill other animals. Lions kill animals, we kill animals. So whenever you deviate from that, it's really scary because it's going away from what the majority is saying. But that's whenever you start finding true freedom to follow your values, to follow what really is important for you. So if you're starting to feel that, pay attention to it. And it takes courage, but I promise you can do it. And once you do it, it becomes easier in so many other places of your life.
Yeah. Yes. And you just said exactly what we talk about constantly, and even your word choices. And I just think that's like incredible. That's it. That's it. Because people do often. So I historically, worked as a therapist, and I worked in drug and alcohol, inpatient rehab. And one of the main things that you do as a practice there is I would give my clients a sheet of paper with all these values written down on it, right? So 100 different words, different values. And I would say, I want you to take the time and choose for yourself, like sit with this and choose for yourself which of these values feel important to you. And if the ones that feel important to you aren't on there, write them on there. People always choose love, compassion, respect. They almost always choose those same core things. Then they might choose a little outlier, fitness, something like that. Great. But those core ones are there. And then, it's like, are you living in alignment with those values?
Mm.
No. If you're in rehab, you're not more often than not. But that ties to the, eating animals thing totally. And it ties to this like epidemic of depression and anxiety and all this stuff that is going on in our society and even globally. We feel one way in our heart and then we're acting a different way and it screws us up, right? And that's just so awesome that you just talked about that, because we talk about it and we're like, this is going on, right? And like,
I mean, that's what the next question you said you were going to ask us, you took Sarah's answer.
Oops.
No, that's it. You said it.
Yeah, totally.
It's values. And Sarah even taught me this phrase. She calls it values sickness. And it's what you just described, I guess. But, we are loving beings, I think. I mean, we've seen that over and over with the animals here, and we're just complex animals. And we're loving. It's just, we have to accept that. We have to accept that anytime we don't live in alignment with that, it's going to hurt us. We get sick. We're sick right now, right? We're in a pandemic quarantine. I know it gets really abstract and grand, but it is really kind of that simple, that what we reap, we sow, and what we're putting out there. And if we're not putting out love, it's going to hurt us. Our hearts don't like that.
Yeah. So important. So many wonderful things that can come out of this. And I hope that the listeners are also gaining that from this conversation. Well, this has been so great, Jonina and Sarah. Before we leave, I want you to tell the listeners how they can connect with you, specifically how they can also donate to your farm sanctuary. And if you want to tell us a little bit about the move, that would be great too.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we are Lancaster Farm Sanctuary. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And then we also have our website, which if you can't remember, you can just link to it on Instagram or Facebook. But it's lancasterfarmsanctuary.org. And on there, you'll see, like, as soon as you open the website, there's a banner there about our move. So we are moving at the beginning of next month. So very soon. And part of that is, we need to build a new shelter, a new barn for some of the residents, and we need to update some of the fencing on the new property. So any donations that come in, at this time are going directly to making those things happen. So we're kind of running a small capital campaign to get the barn built and get the fencing taken care of, so that they can, have a nice new place to, not fancy, but like safe and secure for them. So we're so thrilled about it. And then hopefully one day soon, when it becomes safe, we can't wait to have visitors out to our sanctuary again. So, and we were going to have a second tiny house on this property, and so we'll do farm stays and other events like that. So yeah, definitely follow us and stay tuned for what's happening.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I saw that you guys were going to rent out the house, the little tiny house.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put my reservation in for next summer. By then we can all travel, but I'm going.
You should just come. Maybe, we love having people come as like guest speakers and organizing community talks like that. I mean, you should just come do something like that at the farm, and you can just stay with us. We would love to have.
Done.
Yeah,
hey, no,
awesome.
Anybody asks me to speak, pretty much I say yes. So
Great. All right.
And for the listeners, I just want you guys to know these ladies, they're doing amazing work. They're genuine. They're authentic. They are fighting the hard fight to take care of these animals. So if you have some extra funds. If you have time, I know it takes a little effort. I'll make sure I link everything so that you can donate. Please donate to their farm sanctuary. I know it would mean so much to them, and it would mean even more to all the beautiful residents they have there.
Yeah, totally. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
You're welcome. Last thing is I want you to leave us all with a call to action for the week. What is one thing that my listeners can do to improve their lives this week? Of course, besides donating to the sanctuary.
Yeah, of course. So, really what you said earlier, I think one simple thing is maybe just spend some time with yourself reflecting on what it is you value, right? Just do that for yourself and think about that. It's for nobody else to choose for you, right? So some of it requires some kind of like shaking off some old baggage or what you've been told, should be important to you, and just really sit, whether it's prayer or meditation or whatever works for you, and thinking about those things, right? And just think about, like, now, do your actions line up with what you value, right? And how can you make shifts? You don't have to be perfect. None of us are. But I think that's so, so, so powerful and so healing, from an individual level to a community level to a global level, right? If we were thinking about that more, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and on this podcast, I focus a lot on habits and behaviors that improve our well-being and our joy. And this exercise helps for so much. Your parenting, your relationship, with your career, with your free time.
Totally.
If you're a person that values peace and rest, but you're spending, 50 hours a week just like being crazy, then maybe that doesn't line up. So I think that this can be a very grounding exercise that it doesn't have to take too long. And in fact, when I first did this, I kind of just meditate on it every day for a week.
Yeah.
So I actually started writing down and organizing my values, my top 5 values from 1 to 5, because, I'm kind of OCD that way.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Great call to action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I can't wait to meet you in person and all the
likewise. Totally. Thank you so much.
I hope you have a plantastic day.
Yeah,
you too.
Thank you. All right, take care.
I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to having you back again next week. A very special thank you to the band Rocket Surgeons for permission to use the Broccoli song. To find out more about the Rocket Surgeons, please visit their website at rocketsurgeonsband.com or Facebook at Rocket Surgeons Music. Please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Also, all of my social media links can be found in the podcast description. Send me a message and let me know what you think of today's podcast. Sharing is caring. Please share, rate, and review my podcast, and drop me a line if you have ideas for future episodes. Thank you once again, and have a plantastic day.
We're having broccoli.